track or a band, okay? And a lot of people call it the IT, the iliotibial band. So you can call it either. I think I have a track in the notes, which is why. So it goes from, it's basically a continuation from the ilium all the way down to it attaches to the fibula, that they call it, the fibula tract. So this is a really, really thick band of fascia. Like it's so thick and strong that basically we actually physically cannot stretch it. So when people want to stretch their IT band, we're not really stretching the IT band. It's not physically possible. In fact, to stretch it, you'd have to use like an industrial machine to even get it to move like a couple millimeters. It's so strong. But what it serves as is an attachment for all of the muscles around the hip and then going down the femur. And we haven't talked about fascia in this way yet, I don't think, but fascia can be a really important conduit of like kinetic energy through muscles. So it actually can transfer the power from one muscle to another. So all over the body, like for instance, on our back, we've got fascia connecting the glute max to the opposite lat and the opposite shoulder. So we've got this pattern of being able to extend the opposite shoulder and hip. And this is all part of our gait motor pattern and power patterns, right? So fascia and connective tissue is so, like the depth of all the function of this tissue is infinite. But the really important part to remember about the IT band and things like other areas of fascia is that when it's really thick and has a lot of elastic property, it can really transfer force from one muscle to another. So we're going to look at this in the abdominal muscles too, how there's these sheets of connective tissue that transfer power from one muscle to another, which is enabling that muscle to be even stronger. So the IT band, if we have the quad in front, so the quad's going to attach to that lower spine muscle, and it's going to go all the way down to the knee, and then you've got the quad muscles underneath as well. So you've got the quad group, and then you've got the hamstrings that are going to come off the back here. Then these are all going to attach to the IT band as well. And what happens is that if you think about the, and sorry, I'm going to put in the glute max. So the glute max is the rest of the bottom here. So now you can see how this looks like the side of a hip, right? So you've got your quads, your hamstrings, your bum, and then the glute med and the TFL. And all of these have attachments to the IT band. Okay, and if you can think about, like, if you were to erect a tent, like a circus tent, you would need to have equal pulling on the ropes on either side of the what do you call it, poles, right? So that the pole is sitting up straight. So you need the tent to be wired on either side evenly. And so the IT band, if you can think of it like one of the poles, what can happen is that sometimes the muscle, one muscle will get tight, and it's going to pull the IT band more to one side. And then there's dysfunction that happens when that happens. Sometimes the IT band can friction against the greater trochanter or against the hip. And then sometimes it'll friction against the knee. And this becomes very painful. Like, it will stop you from running. It feels like a knife going across the outside of your knee. And often it starts like an ache. And it can also get tight to the point where, like for me, my nerve that's going underneath it and going here is getting compressed and creating a bit of numbness down my leg. So the IT band itself, it's not that the IT band is tight, it's that there's some muscles that are pulling more on it than others. And so there needs to be a congruous or an equal balance all around this IT band of muscular strength so that the IT band is resting in its normal place. And sometimes when we start a new training program, like for running or something like that, remember how I talked about it's very linear, right? So maybe the glute med starts to get weak and the quad starts to really be overactive on the outside quad, because the inside quad isn't attached to the IT band, it's just the outside one. Now what you can feel from that is that, and you guys should feel along your IT band, on the front part, that there's going to be spots near the IT band that are really sore. So you have to go right, find that IT band and then go right into the quad right near it. And you'll find like spots that make your eyes want to roll back in your head. So these are little areas of adhesions or trigger points or hyperactive nerves around where they attach to the IT band. Okay, and that's also going to create pain. So rolling out your IT band can be really painful. But it's really an area, if you start to have any dysfunction around the knee or the hip that you want to look at is not the IT band itself, but the attachment points of the muscles along the IT band. And so when we stretch the IT band, and you can say we're stretching the IT band in class or we're going to do some IT band, but what you're stretching is actually the attachments to the IT band. And one of the major areas we want to start to stretch is in the glutes, right? So a lot of the time we'll get into the glute max and really start to relieve that pressure on the IT band. So with the IT band, we're not actually stretching the IT band, we're stretching and equalizing the muscle activation around it. And sometimes that means for us is that we actually have to train the inside thigh more, because the outside is where it tends to get to build up around the IT band and to start to like pull laterally. And then what can happen is it also starts to move the kneecap over, right? Because if you think about all of the quad muscles attached to the tibia right here. So what happens is if the quad muscles start to pull over to this side or they get tight on the IT band, now we've got a problem at the knee because the whole quad starts to pull the kneecap over and it's not gliding properly over the knee like it should be. So it's important to keep the health of all of the muscles around the hip, around the legs, so that there's, you know what I mean? Like, so sometimes when we feel pain one spot, like, oh, I have patellar pain, so pain in the kneecap or in the patellar tendon, which is the quad tendon, it can be something adhesed onto the IT band here. So it's important for us to always look for kind of global, what's the actual, where's the crime being committed? Because it's often not where the victim is screaming. The crime was committed up here, but the victim's like, yeah.
What is your labrum? And is that a muscle or is it a tendon?
No, the labrum is like part of the hip capsule.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because I had a tear in it, but
Yeah, that's so. Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's one of the labrum is part of the deep cup of the hip. So not only can it cause referred pain, but it probably can cause dysfunction in the muscles around it, which could mess up the knee. What's that?
Downstairs. It's a band.
It's a band?
They used to be like amplified.
Oh,
really loud. This is no
That's a church service thing. That's a band that is stuck.
So one of the ways you can make the IT band more taut. Like if you were to do this and then start really pull this hip back, you're making this quite taut, right? And you're stretching through the glute and you're stretching through the hamstring. And it's really creating, that's probably so that's why people would call that an IT band stretch, because it's really making it taut. But all I'm trying to differentiate is that the tissue itself isn't stretching, but you're stretching all the muscles where they pull on them. So I still don't think it's a problem to say we're going to get into the IT band today, because you are getting into all the stuff that attaches to it. Yes?
You're saying taut?
Taut.
What does that mean?
Tight. It's getting, sorry, do you,
When you've got a rope and you tighten it up, it's
yeah, it's taut. There's no more give to it. It's at, whereas if I'm kind of like this on this leg, it's slack. And then if I do this, it's really taut. Yeah, it's probably not a common word. Yes.
So what about runners?
Yeah.
Who have overdeveloped outside muscles.
Yes.
How would you get them to use those inner muscles to balance out that?
Yoga. No, just no, yeah, you have to cross train. I don't think it's the healthiest just to do one thing. So, and running is really linear. It's really just in one direction. And so I think it's important to cross train. Yoga is one of the best things.
What kind of movements activate those muscles?
Anything with adduction. yoga, just even all of the long holds that we do, like there's a balance between abduction and adduction every time you're in a lunge, right? Because if you're not adducting, then your knee starts to go like this. So to bring your knee right over that second toe, you need to adduct to bring it back to the midline. And if you're over adducting, then you have to get the abduction going on. So I think yoga is a very balancing type of work. Any type of exercise where you're moving laterally too. So if you're doing like, if you did side squats going like this would really work abduction and adduction. Because it's the opposite movement as this, right? Now you're in a totally different plane. You're in the frontal plane versus the sagittal plane.
Ooh, like boxer.
Yeah.
Like the boxer. Yeah, that. And then going sideways.
Yeah.
It's hard.
How do I even end up doing that? And if you think about like side planks and stuff, like all of this is working around the whole like pelvis and all the muscles inside and outside. So there's a lot of things we can do to start to stabilize that in yoga. But yeah, I just think with yoga is one of the most comprehensive things. I mean, but what's not that comprehensive about yoga would be like training the cardiovascular system. Some types of yoga are very, like there's a lot of like, the heart rate will get up, especially sun salutations, the heart rate gets up, but not as much as say if you were going to do sprints or go for a long run. So in terms of yoga, I think it's super comprehensive, but it's not a bad idea to go running once a week to get a bit of cardiovascular training, right? But not that yoga's not enough, but like if you were to pick just one sport and only do one thing every single day, I probably would suggest doing yoga over just running every day, because you need. And I'm like I love to run, but I couldn't even run for very long until I did yoga 5 times a week, so that I actually wasn't having IT band pain anymore. Because before I've done yoga since like 2001, but at the time I was doing that maybe once every 2 weeks, and then I was running and I was teaching spinning and I was bodybuilding. So like when I actually was trying to run, I could do it for maybe 10 minutes before everything started to seize up and hurt. And then fast forward like 10 years, and now I'm doing yoga 5 times a week and running once a week or something. It's like I have a whole different body. So I think it's important to cross-train. And the other thing too is your body really needs different stimulation too. Like to take a ran once a week, you probably get like better at your sun salutations. You know, like everything influences something else, and the body gets very adaptable. Like the body's magical. The body can like heal from things and do amazing things, but the body only goes to what you've put on it, right? So if you've plateaued, then you need to introduce something spicy, do something different, because the body constantly needs to be taken to some sort of different stimulation. Not necessarily something that's harder or more taxing, but something different, so that different parts of your motor cortex are activated and different parts of your brain are starting to work, right? Okay, so is it like a Christian band or something?
No, not music.
Really?
Damn well.
It's not, it's hipster.
It's hipster.
Do they all have beards?
Even the women.
Because I read an article that they were just started taking, and this is no offense to beards because I actually really like them, and my husband had one but he just shaved it off. But they said that beards, almost all the beards that they sampled in, I forgot what this thing was taken, had E. coli strain, which is fecal bacteria. But you know, it honestly makes sense to me because, like, I don't know, it makes sense to me. Yeah. I don't know. But anyways, I was like, because think of the food that would get stuck. Unless, you know, with beard hygiene, I'm sure it's probably very different. It's just like, I was reading up like, oh geez. By the way, do you know what the most dirty thing in the hotel room is the TV remote.
Yeah, over there.
I learned that from my girlfriend, and I wish I never knew it because before I wouldn't have even thought of it. But now I'm always like, okay. So let's look at the psoas, which is the hip flexor. So we've got, remember these are the vertebrae. Pretend that they're more symmetrical than they are. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, T12. And then we've got sacrum. Oops, that's not the sacrum. Sacrum. And then, my drawings are getting worse. That's cool. So this is the lesser trochanter, okay? Because all of the muscles we've talked about so far have been attaching to the greater trochanter. So this muscle is crazy. It attaches to the anterior, the front side of the vertebra, from T12 to L5. And then it goes across the SI joint, because if it's tight and weak, then it's going to be creating a lot of dysfunction, not only in the spine, but in the SI joint and the hip. But if it's really healthy, it's one of the most powerful muscles that you are powerful when the psoas is healthy. It really helps you to like press to handstand or press to anything, right? I feel bad that you're filming now because I was just joking when I said it before.
Oh, no, you started like early and I forgot. So
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I was just joking because before I had like a mic and everything, so I hope I didn't offend you.
Oh no, it's okay.
Okay.
I'm not offended.
So anyways, the psoas and the iliacus, the main action of these muscles is flexion of the hip. Okay, so that's why this is the group called the hip flexors. So the main action at the hip is at the hip, and it's hip flexion. Because of its attachment to the lesser trochanter, and when the hip flexes, because it's attached to the inside, it also externally rotates the hip, okay? So if we look at the hip, it's a lot more, there's a lot more muscles that create external rotation than internal. So let's think of the muscles that create external hip rotation. So we've got this iliopsoas.
What about the medial?
The glute medius is abduction, but minimus does do a bit of internal rotation. But think of the back of the butt. Glute max and yes, which is part of the external hip rotators, right? So external rotation is the dominant movement of the hip in terms of rotation. So what's the muscle that we have to internally rotate the hip? You know, glute medius does do a bit of internal rotation, but remember we just talked about it, the one that corrects TFL. Exactly. Okay. So what action would the iliopsoas have, or the psoas have at the spine?
Supports the lower back.
Well, yeah, it definitely supports, and there's a lot of, when we see low back pain, there's usually dysfunction in the psoas. It flexes the spine, yeah. So I want to be my volunteer, just for a second. Okay, so I'm going to have you sit on my thighs. You can sit facing them. Sit right on my thighs. So when she's sitting on my thighs, she's not heavy enough. But if she was heavy enough and it pinned me, then when I tried to flex my hips instead, I would flex my torso. Right? Just right now, yeah, so you see, I'm using my psoas, but because she's sitting on me, it's flexing my torso instead. Thank you. So without somebody sitting on my thighs, then me doing that exact same contraction is going to do this. So its prime action is hip flexion, but when the hips are fixed, it will help flex the torso. Okay, so let's think of some postures where...
So like you're doing that when you lift up your spine, like you've got your legs
Yeah.
in the gym when you lift that spine extension.
Yeah.
Would that like activate the psoas?
You mean...
Because your hips are like underneath your legs are the same way.
Oh, like the move when
You
you're...
know when you do the like that.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that one actually, that's working the back muscles a bit more. Yeah, but your hip flexors would be working for sure. But when you're coming up, it would be your back muscles that are really, really working.
I know you guys feel right hips.
Yeah, you do. No, they're definitely working. They're eccentrically contracting. Okay, so let's think of some postures where the hip flexors are active or contracted. The iliopsoas. Low lunge for sure. Which lunge? Which leg though?
The one that you lifted.
Oh, which one are you talking about? Oh, yeah, that's huge hip activation. But we were just talking about low lunge too. So absolutely. Utthita Hasta Hustasana D, just like it was activating the thigh a lot, it's activating the hip flexor a lot. Low lunge, which hip is the hip flexor acting on? The front one. Yeah. So anytime that the hip is flexed, we have hip flexor activation, right? What about boat pose? Activation, right? Contraction. What about bow pose? Yeah, lengthening of the muscle. What about wheel pose? Lengthening, yeah. What about warrior 3 standing leg? Contraction. Yeah, excellent, guys. So the psoas, it's so important to have health of the psoas, and I think that it's like some of the muscles in the shoulders, like the upper traps, where it gets a very bad name, like, oh, don't use your upper traps. Well, that's not true. It's just that what the problem is that our upper traps are really overactive. So they're tight and they're weak. So we need to lengthen them and strengthen them, right? So the problem with the hip flexors is the same thing. Like we're sitting all day like this, right? We're sitting in the car, we're sitting in class, and they need to be able to get long and to get strong. So that's why I love yoga, is that we do a lot of like hip, like again, in our daily life, we don't do a lot of back bending, you know? Back bending is not something you do at the office or at home generally, unless you're practicing it on purpose to do stretching. So to open up the front side of the body and opening up the hip flexors is so important. So every cobra you do, every upward dog you do, every bridge pose you do, every camel, every dancer, every pose where you're starting to open the hip flexors is creating more health around it. Because we have to strengthen those hip flexors too, especially in yoga, because the hip flexors are one of the parts of a hip, one of the actions of hip flexor is it really solidifies the femur in the joint, right? So it's really connecting that femur inside the joint. So to plug your leg bone into the pelvis is really important. So it's stabilizing that hip joint. So when we're doing like a press to handstand, you have to suck your femurs into your pelvis so that you can come up into a press. Does that make sense? So I'm gonna show you with pincha how the hip flexor can help. So pincha, a lot of the time we jump into it, but if you really activate the hip flexors, you can press into it. And this also involves having some flexibility of the hamstrings too, because to walk in really close for pincha, you need the hamstrings to be flexed. But now with my right hip flexor, I'm really sucking in and leaning forward. Oh, I did about a million of these yesterday, so maybe I'm a little tired. But basically, I suck my right hip flexor into my body until the toes start to come off the floor. And then here, I'm sucking in the left one, sucking it in, sucking it in, sucking it in, sucking it in, to lower down quickly, or slowly. So the more that you can actually harness the power of the hip flexor and pulling your femur into your pelvis, then it starts to pull your toes off the floor and help you to press up. Same thing with headstand. Connecting the abdominals with the hip flexors. So advancing the practice involves a lot of strengthening around the hip flexors. So I think that the hip flexors, we need to spend a lot of time stretching them. That's really important, but we also want to be harnessing the power of the hip flexors. So in boat pose, some people are like, I feel like I'm using my hip flexors a lot. Well, you are, because you have to be. But we do want to engage the deeper abdominals as well by drawing in, so allowing the belly to start to draw in and creating that girdle action of those muscles starting to draw in. But it is, like, Navasana is a hip flexor strengthener. Boat pose is strengthening the hip flexors, and that's okay. What would be some postures that would elongate the hip flexors? Or stretch them? Lunge, which one? Oh, sorry, the back leg. I meant which leg. I said which one. Yeah, the back leg. What about, so what two things do we want to do to stretch the hip flexors? What are we trying to do to the hip?
Push ups, stick.
Yeah. Yeah, so you'd be elongating the spinal portion of the hip flexors for sure. Yeah. What about, what was I going to say? Sorry.
You said the two things to stretch.
Yes, sorry. What are the two parts? So what are the two actions we want to create to stretch the hip flexor? What is the action of the hip that we want? What is the movement of the hip that we want to stretch the hip flexor?
Push it forward. Like any bending, like back.
Yeah, back bends which create hip what? Extension. And so what do we want in the spine? Extension too. Okay, so any posture that's going to extend the spine and extend the hip is going to open up the hip flexors. So it's your whole back bend. But a really good hip flexor stretch too is hero, actually. So when you're sitting in hero pose, when you're just sitting, there's a contraction of the hip flexor because you're basically flexing the hips. But if you come into Supta Virasana, then you're going to stretch the hip flexors.
And the low back.
Yeah. So you want to counter the action of Supta Virasana, creating so much of an arch in your back by drawing in the lower abdominals and really trying to flatten, because the tendency is going to be to have more of an arch in the low back, so you need to draw in the lower belly and flatten the arch a little bit to counter how much your back wants to arch. And part of that arching is just the hip flexors getting tight.
Hip flexors are really tight. It's going to pull on all that muscle in your knee, right? And then I find that pose sometimes gets uncomfortable. Like you said, there's almost like that pulling in the knee, and I get worried about that.
Yeah. Well, there's other muscles. Oh. Beet juice is the worst to get on your clothes. There's other muscles too that are getting really stretched. And Virasana that pull on the knee as well. But it is, and I also, one of my favorite modifications for Virasana is to do it on a bolster. Because it takes so much pressure out of the back when you lie on a bolster. And then you can lie on a bolster for like 3 minutes and then maybe do a minute without the bolster. Because everything's already opened up a little bit. Your knees will be achy by then, but it's pretty good. Okay, so let's look at the abdominals now. Do we do the abdominals? No? Okay. So, this is going to be kind of a rough and dirty fascia. Like the IT band. That's going from the xiphoid process, so the sternum and the lower ribs, all the way to the pubic bone. So there's this sheet of fascia, like the IT band. Okay, and so this fascia is not only protecting your internal organs, but it's also serving as an attachment point for the muscles that we're going to layer you've got one on the back in the same area, and on the back it's called the thoracolumbar fascia. So if you think about thoracic spine, lumbar spine, thoracolumbar fascia. So we're going to look first at the first layer of abdominals, which are the deepest. And this is called, I'm going to erase part of the top here while I look at the muscles. So you can imagine these are the ribs. This one's called the TVA. That's what we call it as an acronym, but it's the transverse abdominis. So the transverse abdominis is the muscle that we really want to cue into in yoga. And a lot of the time when we talk about either drawing the navel into the spine or Uddiyana Bandha, have you guys talked about bandhas? Uddiyana Bandha is transverse abdominis. That's what creates Uddiyana Bandha, or the Kriyas, right? Do you guys know the Kriyas where you really draw in your belly and then suck everything up? That's transverse abdominis that's doing that action. So transverse abdominis is a muscle that comes horizontal or perpendicular to the fascia on the stomach. And this muscle serves as a girdle. Okay, so it's our natural girdle of our stomach. And what the transverse abdominis does is it draws everything in. Okay, so just put your hand on, just kind of above your pelvis into your belly, and then close your eyes, and then cough. What did you feel? Yeah, and that's the rebound actually. So usually when people feel it jut out, it's because it's been pulled in and then it juts out. So when you cough, your body pulls in with the transverse abdominis, and when you feel something pop out, it's because it's pulled in and popped back out. So it's a rebound effect. It's been drawn in and it's popped out again. So the transverse abdominis is intricately wired into your brain and your spinal cord to brace. So if you know you're going to lift a heavy weight, then your brain will draw that muscle in before you lift it up. If you're going to cough, if you're going to sneeze, there's a neurological cueing to draw in that muscle. And what it does is when it draws in, if you can imagine, it increases the intra-abdominal pressure. So everything is now tighter, and then there's more stability. So there's less room for the spine or anything to slip around when the pressure has been increased. So it's very, very important for the health of the spine, and it's intricately related to some of the deep spinal muscles too. So when this cues in, then other ones do too. Okay, so then the next layer we have is called the internal obliques. So the internal obliques are layered on top of the transverse abdominis, and the fibers are going to go in an upward direction. And the internal obliques will have the same action as the transverse abdominis will also help you with side bend. The internal obliques will also help with the drawing in, side bending, but because of the line of their fibers, they will also rotate. And so the internal obliques, when they contract, rotate to the same side. Okay, so if I was contracting my internal obliques on the right, I would turn to the right. Okay? Same with the left. So they activate the rotation towards the side of the muscle. Now, when we look at the external obliques, they are on top of the internal obliques. So you can see how important the core is. Like, we're just wrapping the core with muscles right now. So the next level is the external obliques. And now these are going to go in the opposite direction.
You said they wrap the internal?
Well, it's wrapping all the internal organs and stuff, like with muscles, right? And then you remember how we talked about the IT band and how that really strong connective tissue will transfer power. Well, this piece of connective tissue also transfers power from side to side, right? So the external obliques do rotation in the opposite direction. So if I contract my right external obliques, I turn to the left. And so if I was turning to the left using my obliques, then my left internal obliques would be turning to the left, and my right external obliques would be turning to the left. Don't get too caught up in that. Just know that one set of obliques rotates to the same side, and the other one rotates to the opposite side. And I want more to understand of this layering, of how important our core power is, that we've got transverse abdominis, internal obliques, external obliques, and then we're going to put one more layer on. So the final layer just lies in the front, actually. We've seen this word before, rectus. But instead of rectus femoris, which is the long quad muscle that lives on the femur, this one is called rectus abdominis. Okay, so we know where it lives. It lives on the abdominals. So look how long this sheet of fascia is. It goes from the xiphoid process all the way to your pubic bone. And the rectus abdominis is going to lie on top of this sheet of fascia. It's attached to that fascia. So basically, your rectus abdominis, your abs or your 8-pack or your 6-pack, lives from your ribs all the way to your pubic bone. That's how long it is. And it's really cool because what it is it's these sections of muscle . So there's 4 on each side. And it's broken up by parts of fascia. So why would that be?
Transfer power.
Exactly. So because it's broken up by this power, it's like it can the muscle contracts and then pa-poom, pa-poom, pa-poom. It slingshots that power to the next section of muscles. So it's very powerful. The fascia acts like a conduit of this power. It slingshots that kinetic energy to the next muscle. And then the other thing, because it's separated, it allows for more segmental contraction rather than just a big sheet contracting. Because they're in pieces, you can articulate a little bit more how you're contracting. So we've got a big team here creating this. So this is the powerhouse of our body, is our core. And then we've got fascia extending out so that we can connect this core power all the way to our toes and our fingertips. But we want to connect people to this and to stabilize everything here, because then everything else becomes easy, right? If you've got this connected, then when you're doing a handstand, it'll be really easy compared to if there's disconnection here. When the ribs are jutting out or the bum's jutting out or there's stuff going on. You really want to connect this core piece. You guys get that? That's my favorite drawing, because I think it looks like a Scottish kilt or something.
The external obliques, which one activates rotation towards the same side?
Internal.
Internal.
This might not help, but I always think internal, when we say to the same side, it's ipsilateral, and if it's away from, it's contralateral, so I think internal ipsi, the same initial, but I don't know if that's helpful. Okay. Perfect, we have enough time. So, let's do some review before we finish, because we've got a lot of information that I've put out here, and I think it'd be nice to take some time to review. But before we do that, Michael said you guys had to do a 1-minute Utkatasana because you didn't do your homework.
I did my homework.
You did? Did you bring it? Okay, thank you.
Well, I
2 out of 3. That's perfect.
I don't know for the rest of us.
You're gonna get attacked by the group.
Oh, I did do something.
Yeah, I'm just gonna, yeah.
I did something I forgot that I did.
Okay, but instead, because Utkatasana is his thing, we're gonna do, let me see what we're gonna do. Let's do Navasana. All right. Flexion, and then the standing leg, sorry, the leg that's up in standing splits. Extension.
And internal rotation.
And internal rotation, because you're correcting for external rotation. So what would be the muscle that you would cue into to do internal rotation? TFL. Excellent. Okay, what happens if you have a foot that's like a block? Yeah, you have to pick up your marbles with your toes. But you'll probably get hip and knee problems. What muscle is important in standing one-legged balances to keep the pelvis stabilized? Glute med. Absolutely. You guys are hot today. Glute med. It's the muscle that's right here along the side. What area of the spine do we want to encourage the most into extension and back bend? That one's going to extend quite a bit. So what we're trying to do is encourage the thoracic, because the thoracic isn't that mobile in extension. So we want to get the thoracic spine more mobile in extension. What does the serratus anterior do? We did exercises against the wall to work this muscle.
Drawing the shoulder blades back.
That's the rhomboid. The serratus anterior does the separating of the shoulder blades to pull them onto the rib cage. Yes, exactly. So what would be what posture would be important to use the serratus anterior? Plank. And?
Sphinx.
Downward dog, yeah. Sphinx, yeah, absolutely. What else? What if you were handstands, absolutely.
Which one?
Wheel, you're definitely using serratus anterior.
Maybe, I'm not sure.
But it's kind of there's a lot of rotation in the scapula, so a lot of things are kind of at play in wheel, but absolutely. What about in cat-cow? Which of those is activating serratus anterior more?
Cat.
Cat, right. Why is cow called cow? Who knows? Like, who knows? Okay, let's press into child's pose. And then roll up one vertebra at a time. If it's okay for your knee, take the left leg into hero. Take the right foot to the inside of the left leg. And turn to your right, take your left hand to your right knee. And your right hand behind you, or you can grab your right toes. Draw your lower belly in and twist. So, on my right side, my internal oblique is turning me to what direction, right or left? Right. Excellent. Where is the lowest attachment of the rectus abdominis? You guys know. So where does the rectus abdominis attach at its lower end? How low does it go? How low does it go? Yeah. Pubic bone, right? Okay. Unwind and switch your legs. So right ankle, left side, right hip. Left foot either inside the right thigh or all the way up to the hip crease. Right hand to left knee. Left hand to left toes are behind you. Draw your lower belly in. Lift your heart to create the extension behind the thoracic spine. Draw shoulder blades on your back using your rhomboids, and then keep your chin in line with your chest until you're twisted as much as you can be, and then turn your neck. So why do we want to turn the neck last, especially the upper top of the neck?
We want to make sure the rest of the spine is turned first to activate the thoracic.
To activate the thoracic, which vertebra has the most movement and rotation of the whole spine?
Neck. And the cervical.
Yeah, C1 or C1, C2? Unwind back to center. Take both of your feet together. Now, our hips are in external rotation. So when we come forward into Baddha Konasana, butterfly, we must be contracting the external hip rotators, right? Because we're externally rotating the hips. Is that correct?
No.
No.
They roll under them.
Yes.
Yeah, they stretch them.
Amazing. Okay, roll up. One thing I forgot to tell you guys about. So the adductors attach from your pubic bones, and they attach all along the inside of the leg. So there's quite a few adductors. Some of them attach like right here, like so right at the, just at the top of the femur right here. And then you've got some that attach, if you follow the meat right here, that attach all the way down to your tibia. So would we need to do different stretches to activate these two areas? Yeah. So for the long ones, what would be a better stretch? This or this?
That one.
Right, because now they're taut. My favorite word. We slacken them when we bend the knees because this knee slackens the attachment at the tibia, right? So when you extend them fully, I want to get a hip crab. That's not happening. Then you get into these. So when you're targeting the adductors, like say you had someone who had tight adductors, to get the short adductors, Baddha Konasana is great. And all the wide leg forward folds are great too. But to get the long ones, you need to do some straight leg adductor stretches. Yes?
So wide leg would be better for somebody with knee issues.
If it was stemming from the longer adductors and to stretch that out, yeah. Yeah. And if somebody has knee issues and there's gapping either on the outside or the inside of the knee, then probably having a longer leg would feel better, especially if they can activate their thighs. It just, the knee is so, it's like there could be issues all around it, so it depends where the issue is, right? Okay. My feet are plantar flexed or dorsiflexed? And what's creating the dorsiflexion in my feet? What muscle?
Oh, that one.
I can.
Yeah, tibialis anterior. Okay, my feet are plantar flexed. What's creating the plantar flexion in my feet?
Anterior tibia.
Yes! Well, we're stretching the anterior tibialis, but we didn't talk about it. But in general, yeah. What? Can you touch your toes to the floor? Try and touch them to the floor. Keep your knees straight. So straighten your knees and then touch your toes to the floor. And don't let it go. For 5, get your toes to the floor. 4, keep pressing. 3, anyone cramping? 2, and 1. And then stretch it out. And then just put the ball of your foot away, but pull your toes to you. And then point your toes. And then pull the ball, push the ball, pull the toes, and then stretch into dorsiflexion. One more time, balls of the foot, point your toes, lift your toes, and then stretch your feet. So the calves are what, like the calf group is what creates plantar flexion in the foot. But for foot motion, there's less musculature that creates dorsiflexion than plantar flexion. So not only have we got the most superficial muscle is called the gastrocnemius, and it attaches, all of the calf group attaches to the heel via the Achilles tendon, right? And you don't want to get injured here. That's like a yucky injury to have. So all of these guys, the posterior, the superficial muscles come to the Achilles tendon and they create plantar flexion. And then underneath these guys are the foot flexors, okay? So the things that actually articulate the toes. So you can plantar flex with your toes back, remember we just practiced that? And then you can can also have toe flexion, which involves a deeper layer of muscles. So you can tell that in terms of human locomotion and human power, we need more plantar flexion than we need dorsiflexion. So what would we use plantar flexion for?
Walking,
Walking,
jumping.
jumping. Yeah, so it's very important in jumping and sprinting. Because when you sprint, you're running off your toes more, right? When you're doing longer runs, from my understanding, is that you have more of like a full foot follow through. But if you're sprinting 50 meters, you better believe you're probably just running on your balls of your feet, right? Any questions? Are you okay? Your eyes look good. Okay. You guys did amazing. I think everything really started to connect at the end, which I hope felt better than at the beginning when we were talking about cells.
Are you
So-
back again?
I'm not back again, unfortunately. Like I said, it's just not enough time, like to give everything that I want to give. But I'm on Facebook with you guys, and as I said, everyone is welcome to come see me for a student rate, which is I think $20 less than a regular rate per session. So I encourage you, and if you have any anatomy questions, I have people that I taught 3 years ago. A girl just emailed me and asked me about one of her clients. So, you know, get in touch with me. I'm always open to hearing what's going on. And you guys are amazing. Thank you for being
Thank
so,
you.
today you were just so attentive, and I really appreciate it. And for even letting me do Navasana with you. It's too bad. I would like to come in and teach you guys an asana class so we could talk and edit. That would be great. I'm gonna ask him. Maybe I could come in like a Sunday morning or something. You guys are only here Saturday, Sunday, right? Yeah. That's why the course is so long. Holy moly. Thank you guys.
Thank you.